It's time for the Severe MMA Preview Show with Sean Sheehan, Spencer Kite, Harry Powell, and your host, Ian O'Neill.
We're back. It's UFC 281 in New York, New York. That's right. My name is Ian O'Neill, and I'm joined by Shawnee T. Sheehan, Harry Powell, Spencer Kite, and we're going to bring you the Severe MMA YouTube preview show. And we're looking forward to doing it as well. We got a big fight in the middleweight division that will top the card. On we have a strawweight championship fight that will serve as the co-main event, where Carla Esparza takes on Zhang Weili, with Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira taking on each other for the third time in combat sports, but the first time in mixed martial arts. And you know, that's been the big story that's been kind of revolving around this fight, is what went down in the kickboxing fights. Obviously, though, both men have shared the ring before, with Alex Pereira coming out on top on both of those occasions. With the last one, that time they met, it was a vicious knockout loss for Israel Adesanya. But he has the chance to kind of right those wrongs coming in at UFC 281. And the big story kind of coming around here, especially from my perspective, maybe from Sean's perspective too, and I'll bring Sean in a minute, is the performance level of Israel Adesanya. Getting to that, you know, he's an established champion at this stage. Getting to that superstar status, getting to be a household name. Is that something that's on his resume or on his repertoire right now? I guess it's hard to tell. He says he doesn't care what the fans say. He says he doesn't care what the media says. But there's been a lot of barking before this fight about how boring his last couple of contests have been. He says that he wants to go in there and make Alex Pereira freeze like Elsa. Well, I can tell you, Alex Pereira is not looking to build a snowman. He's looking to come in there and he's looking to knock your head clean off your shoulders. And that's the story of this fight. In a world, Sean, where the performance levels of Israel Adesanya have been criticized, and I believe rightly so, the guys might think differently. Is this the fight where he's promising a horror show? Because in reality, the only horror show that I had to look at in relation to Israel Adesanya was that Jared Cannonier fight when I watched it back, because it wasn't really great to look at. It wasn't that exciting. We had fans leaving the stadium. He's coming in again, promising the sun, moon, of the stars. I don't know if you believe him or not. I don't think you do, Shawnee. But is that the big one coming into this fight for you?
It is a little bit like here's what I'll say, right? I think it's been a talking point this week, right? But I'm interested to see, is it actually a talking point from like, oh, people are saying you're boring, Israel, what do you think about that? Or is it a talking point from actually people covering the sport and fans of the sport as well, saying this guy has been boring consistently now? Are we really going to buy his rubbish again? Right? Because that's the way I think it should be. Because like, looking at sport from our point of view, and look, from a fan's point of view, reality is reality. But looking at it from our point of view, I think we have to look at the reality, assess it, and then talk about it. And for Adesanya, if you don't look at his last few fights and not think it's been boring, you're in cuckoo land, I think. Now, you can say it's effective, you can say it's winning, and I absolutely agree with that, and I've said that myself as well, and fair play to him. But if he's coming out, from your point of view, Ian, I know you said it when we did that preview show, you talked about it mattering to you and the way people talk and then how they fight. For me, it matters, and it not matters to you as well, but from when I look at the point of view, like, he says he wants to be a star, he acts like a star, the UFC is looking for a big star, and he's not had star-making performances since, you know, obviously the Costa fight was, you know, such an easy matchup, he's always going to blow him away, and the Gastelum fight was, you know, one of the greatest fights of all time, absolutely brilliant, but since then, it's like the outmatched guys. And I'm looking at it from that point of view. I'm looking at it kind of the coverage point of view. No, I haven't taken that many in. I'm wondering as well, as from your point of view, because you take a lot more in than me, but like, it feels like this card is going massively under the radar. You know, we're recording this a little bit later in the week now as well than usual, even so it's been a couple of days and the media has started and stuff. it feels like a fight night kind of card to me, that there isn't much talk about it, and there's some great fights on it. It's a very interesting matchup, this one, in terms of, two kickboxers, two guys who've fought before, and I'm back and watch those fights today, and maybe we can get into that in a second. But it feels like it's the buzz that usually is starting to start around now. I haven't really seen any of it, but look, not to start this in a negative, I think it's a very, very good card, a very interesting card, an interesting fight. And as we said, Ian, on that preview show we did, and I said in the Severe MMA podcast this week, I'm not going to be coming out after this fight if it's a snooze fest and criticizing Adesanya too much. This is the type of fight, like the Yoel Romero fight as well, probably should be a snooze fest from Israel Adesanya's point of view. You don't want to get involved in the power of guys like Pereira or Yoel Romero or anything like that. Use your skills and win the fight. I have no problem with that. It's some other sorts of fights that I have a problem with. And for maybe the on-trend eye or the fan out there, when he promises the sun, moon, and stars, doesn't deliver him in those other fights, and now he promises it again going into this, how are you going to decipher between those if all you see at the end is kind of these very good technical performances with not much entertainment, not much excitement, and more than half the crowd leaving in the third round or the fourth round? I think that's a big issue for Adesanya, and obviously that's part of it. Obviously not all part of it. We'll talk about the fight, the breakdown of the fight. Hopefully the fight is very good, the tactics and all of that, but you asked, so I answered you.
100%, and it was very well answered as well. For me, just kind of reiterate what you were saying about what I said on that show. It matters to me because we're paying money to see this, right? And for me, when I'm going to be paying for a pay-per-view, and when fans are paying for a pay-per-view, you want to get some level of value for money. And I don't feel that we've got that with Israel Adesanya fights recently. Look, at everyone can have an off night. That's completely fine. But there is no acknowledgement from Israel. It's just like, this happened, on to the next one. Blaming the opponents, blaming everybody else, pointing the finger, which isn't the worst thing to do. Obviously, you need a dance partner, Spencer, to kind of go in there and do the thing. But also, you have to kind of take a certain level of risk as well. And that's what I like to see in fighters. I know that that's not everybody as well. But like Sean said, and I kind of agree with him, with the point that I don't think that this is the fight to go out there and start taking too much chances, especially on the feet, when you're talking about a guy like Alex Pereira.
So this is probably going to be where I piss the two of you off, but so we're going to just pick and choose now. So you can be okay with him not stepping on the gas and charging after Alex Pereira, but if he doesn't do it against Jared Cannonier, he's a cunt.
That's exactly how I feel.
Absolutely
exactly
correct.
How I feel.
100%.
Because I think the levels of danger that Jared Cannonier possessed, right? And it was more evident as the fight went on that became less and less of a threat.
Jared Cannonier has knocked out heavyweights.
Yeah, but
Jared Cannonier has ridiculous power.
Well, Jared Cannonier has probably less of an exciting highlight reel than Alex Pereira, and Alex Pereira only has 7 mixed match.
Alex Pereira's highlight reel is largely kickboxing. Then in the 1 year that he's been in the UFC, he knocked out an absolute can in Andreas Mihalidis in his debut, couldn't knock out Bruno Silva, and then knocked out Sean Strickland, who fought the dumbest fight in the history of mankind, just walking forward, asking to get hit with a left hand.
Don't worry, I'm going to be talking about
so
that
are we now going this is the dude? So we're going to be angry with him for not fighting Robert Whittaker and Jared Cannonier and Marvin Vettori, but if he takes that tact against Alex Pereira, who has less of a proven track record in this sport than those three gentlemen, we're perfectly okay with it.
If you beat Man City 1-0, it's a great result. If you beat Tranmere Rovers 1-0, it's a terrible result.
It's still the same result.
No.
No.
Yeah, it is.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, it is, though. Because at the end of the day, he's getting the same paycheck. He's still maintaining the belt.
If people aren't going to tune into the pay-per-views because you're in boring fights, that's going to hit you in the pocket.
Sure, eventually, yes.
I'm not saying that that's the most important.
Yes,
thing
but
here.
it is though. It is what you guys are saying.
We have the right to criticize, and we're not picking and choosing.
I'm absolutely okay with criticizing. Criticize all you want, but to say you're not picking and choosing is bullshit. You're picking and choosing what fights he gets to be entertaining. He has to be entertaining in, and which fights he can be tactical and take his time with and be patient in.
Yeah,
that's literally picking and choosing.
Okay, hold on a second, right? If you're going in there and you're fighting, name me a world champion BJJ guy there, Harry. Come on, throw me out one. Cron Gracie, right? You're a featherweight and you fight Cron Gracie, and you're a great wrestler, right? Are you going to take him down?
Depends who you are. Like, I think if I could jump in here, right? Because I think I can cut through this pretty well. The reason why Israel Adesanya gets some criticism when he fights certain opponents is because we actually know the level of skill that he has. And I think that the problem for some guys in comparison to others is that when we went and we watched that Kelvin Gastelum fight, we saw Izzy cycle through the gears, and we saw him have to go to 4 to 5 to maybe even up to 6 at points. And then because he chooses not to cycle through those gears in other matchups, people are asking questions as to why he doesn't need to, why he's not choosing to cycle through those gears. Now, Spencer will tell you that that's because he doesn't fucking need to. He's going to get paid the money. The pay-per-views have already been bought by the time he's in the cage, and it doesn't matter to him. From Sean and Ian's perspective, and I think Ian makes a very, very valid point, that actually there are people paying for this card, and generally when Israel Adesanya is on a card like this one, it's a fucking fantastic card top to bottom, right? Now, they expect drama and fireworks and to see actually the skills with which Adesanya possesses. Now, I'm going to disagree with Shawnee here that I think this is the fight for Israel to put the foot on the gas. I don't mean striking, but I think
mixed martial arts for sure. I definitely want to get into the fight tactics in a little bit.
But if I'm Israel Adesanya, and do you remember the first time, one of the first, I can't remember who he beat, but he was like, I'm a dog, I've pissed on the floor, and this is my house now. Like,
that was the first fight. That was when he beat Rob Wilkinson.
Right. That's how you make fans. That's how you make money.
This is the fight to do it.
So my point about to jump back in and take it from that, we saw him go to 4th and 5th and 6th gear, expecting him and wanting him to do that every time out, but not holding everyone to that measure, feels like the epitome of the picking and choosing, right? And like, I get it. Everybody wants to be entertained. I don't want to sit here and watch boring fights, but to look at somebody that's at the top. So we talk all the time about the small window of opportunity. We talk all the time about fighter pay and money and all of those things. And then to turn around and look at somebody when they're at the absolute apex of their earning ability and say, go out and do stuff that's going to put your earning potential at risk against these guys that you're already better than, seems ridiculous to me. Seems like we're asking too much of those people.
It's not that.
There's a scale when it comes to this.
Can I just say one thing? Just one thing quickly, right? What you're kind of taking from this is, it feels like myself and Ian, I'll say it from my point of view, it's kind of denigrating Adesanya in terms of he's not performing high enough. It's exactly what Harry said. It's that we know how good he is. We expect better from him.
Right, but why is it
he doesn't produce that?
There's a level of scale. There's a level of scale.
4 fights of him being absolutely terrible and pick and choose the ones where he's really, really good and say, why isn't he great in those other 4 fights? Call it picking and choosing if you want. That's grand. But the fact of the matter is he has underperformed time after time after time when we know he's a top level fighter. No one has talked about his takedown defense more than me being absolutely top level. Everyone knows how good his kickboxing is. He has it all. He can do it all.
You can go back to previews that I've written as well, where I've called him the most dynamic striker that I've ever seen in the UFC at times, because that's what we've seen. And I just want to make the point is that there's a level of scale on performance as well, where you can fight somewhere in the middle. You can fight somewhere where you have a level of risk, but you can also fight very defensively. And I think that he's fallen on the lower end of that scale in recent fights, where we have seen him kind of go maybe above and beyond with the likes of Robert Whittaker, Paulo Costa, but then we've seen really bad ones. Yoel Romero is a unique exception. I would hold the Yoel Romero fight in the same kind of bracket that you would hold this fight, where that there is like that educated level of risk with Yoel Romero, that, you know, he has that fight ending power. You have to be wary of his takedown. But with someone like Alex Pereira, he's not going to be worried about the takedown. And I think it's probably too much of a risk to kind of go up for a battle or for a quote unquote, like Israel Adesanya said,
no one
an all-out horror.
Either, like, no one's saying going out there be Darren Elkins or be Diego Sanchez.
So my question then would
but
be,
even one more before I'll hand it over to you, Spencer. Even Eugene Bearman was on, and this is great. We're not falling out, people. We're just having a disagreement, and this is a good podcast because of it. Even Eugene Bearman was on Ariel Helwani yesterday saying that he expected more output from Israel Adesanya. The game plan was more output from Israel Adesanya.
Izzy has said it himself. And look, I'm on board that we all want to see more. I guess my question is, when do we start? Where do we start? Taking it away from, like, let's separate it out just from Izzy. What's the measure on on everybody else then?
Izzy should be separate because we're talking about him as a superstar.
Can we do this with every other champion? Can we do this at every other turn?
No, because if you lose a title after one fight, you're forgotten about.
Exactly what I said, because he is special. He is better than other people. Look at Carla Esparza this weekend. Perfect example, same card. You do not expect her to go out there and light Zhang Weili up. If she can win fucking 48, 47, people will say it's fantastic, one of the best performances of her career, because she is not head and shoulders above everyone else like Israel Adesanya is. He's a great champion in a shit division.
Okay, you bring up Carla Esparza, so let's take it back to her last fight, and I'm sure we'll get there eventually. But Rose Namajunas, we all know the level she's capable of, but she doesn't go out and do that every single time, and yet nobody seemed to turn around and be like,
are you serious?
Yeah.
People complained about the last fight, but there have been fights before that weren't great.
I'll criticize every time, and I'll criticize you the next time.
My personal opinion is that we don't do this with everybody, and it's held to even in measures. And like, I understand that Izzy is at a different tier, and so the measure of it is greater because we've seen the absolute brilliance, and to then see him. And he said it, Eugene has said it, we all agree, can do more, but the expectation is different for him, and I disagree with that. My position is expecting more of him, right? But we've seen loads of people set an expectation.
Yeah, and not held them out. Example,
not held them out to be their absolute best every time.
He took risks and he performed. And Israel Adesanya, if you walk like a superstar, if you talk like a superstar, get in there and act like a superstar in the cage as well. That's what I say on it.
I think the only so I'm gonna come in here with a little bit of lack of emotion, right?
Be the voice of reason here, Harry.
I don't think we can use Conor McGregor in many examples because he is one and the same. He could have gone in and lost 6 fights in a row, and I'd have been glued to my fucking screen when he comes on. It doesn't. That we can't use Conor, but we could use somebody like Francis Ngannou, who went out and had an absolute fucking stinker against Derek Lewis. And everyone's saying this is the worst title fight in history. It's this, it's that, it's the next thing. And then he comes out and he, bludgeons some fella, and these things happen in MMA. But like, I think the only argument here, and this is where there is a real discussion to be had, and maybe this is a speaker's corner. We do this all the time. Maybe this is a speaker's corner.
Write it down.
That's a good fight.
I remember when Tyron Woodley was asked about his title reign and how he changed his performance. And he was like, look, I've got a fucking family to feed and I've got a city to hold up. And my problem here is if I go in, the guys that I'm facing, I understand it's 170 and it's a different caliber of opponent. But if I go in there and I throw hell for leather and I get knocked out or I get subbed or I lose a decision, I'm not even getting a fifth of what I'm getting for a championship fight. So I'm not going to take the risks. And he was open with that. Now I understand that Israel Adesanya has come out and said, well, I'm going to give you the risks. I'm going to give you the performance. I'm going to give you the style. And that means that he is asking us to hold him of a certain opinion. I understand that. But I also think that there has to be, as Nick Diaz once famously told us, some words of wisdom, that these things are often wolf tickets. There has to be an understanding that these fighters are prize fighters at the end of the day. And yes, all three of you are right, frankly, that he has to go out there and put, Shawnee's always right when I tell him he's right. Like, correct. He has to go out there and put on entertaining performances because that brings fans in the door and that ups his pay packet. But in the same vein, Spencer is correct that he also has to just fucking win.
He does.
He does, but it's finding the happy balance between the two, I think.
But the thing about it is, right, and I think we can all agree on this. We can all agree to find a happy balance. But like, to become that superstar, and you said McGregor's a bad example to use, and he is, but to become the superstar McGregor became, what did he have to do? He had to take mad chances. Now, I'm not suggesting he takes mad chances like McGregor took necessarily, but if he wants to become the superstar he talks like he is, it's not going to cut it, what he's been doing for the last while. It's just not. We can say, oh, it's great. He's feeding his family, and he will feed his family, and he'll have a nice career. And you know what? He'll be Frankie Edgar fighting 7 fights too long, and he won't be that. Or he could be sitting on a yacht over an Ibiza.
Because like these opinions haven't just sprung up overnight, or me and Sean didn't manifest them. Like we manifested them by looking at it. And then, but a lot of people I've been checking on just out of interest this week, because I knew we were going to start this point, and I knew that there was going to be a clash as well at the start of this one, and that's okay. So I wanted to go out and check, and the general consensus is that, I'm not paying for this fight. It's boring. Who wants to watch Izzy? It's boring. That I've seen a lot more of those comments under his kind of posts and under his interviews and stuff like that I've ever seen before. So I
look forward to all of those folks coming back when he goes out and does something fucking fantastic that they miss because they're bored.
And that's
they're upset about the last 3, even though that the ones before that were dynamic.
Well, that's it. That's mixed martial arts in a nutshell. You're only good as your last fight.
If I could make one more point, right? Just one more. I think there's also, if we look at the fights of Israel Adesanya's title reign, right? He goes out and finishes Rob Whittaker. Rob Whittaker is a guy that you can't fuck around with. We know this. If Israel Adesanya on a bad night, Whittaker probably beats him and maybe even finishes him, right? Like, we know the level of Rob Whittaker. All of us have spoken ad nauseum of how good Rob Whittaker is. Seanie speaks on the big podcast about how good he is over and over and over again. Yoel Romero, we've already chalked that up. It is what it is. It's fine. Paulo Costa, I think everyone agrees Paulo Costa was levels below Israel Adesanya, and Israel showed that. Fine, no problem. Goes out and loses to Jan Blachowicz. I think he learned a lot from that. We saw some of the mental deficiencies. We saw some of the rhythmic sort of idioms that he gets stuck in, and Jan Blachowicz is like, by the way, I'm a big man. I'm going to take you down. Ha ha ha, lol. Marvin Vettori, I agree. He could have done more against Marvin Vettori, but equally, Marvin Vettori is a tough out. He then has Robert Whittaker again, and this is a fight that you can't take on a slight, right? You have to perform in a way that manifests you the win against Robert Whittaker. Jared Cannonier, I mean, I think people downplay Jared Cannonier a little. He's a good fighter. Is he near the level of Israel Adesanya? No, I don't think so. I think I could agree with that. But I do think he's downplayed slightly. And now we come to Alex Pereira. So I think I agree that we expect more from Israel Adesanya, and we could have seen in some of those fights specifically more. But in the same vein, he hasn't been fighting ultimate scrubs in there, So I think actually we all agree, frankly. We do all agree. I think there's some lexicon differences and some synonym differences.
No, I don't agree, but we'll agree to disagree. Jesus, if I could we're all looking to get through the screen at each other's necks here.
Come on, let's talk about the fight.
Let's talk about the fight. No more fighting anymore.
Thanks for trying, Harry.
Alex Pereira is coming in here, and we're talking about guys being levels below. And if we're talking about striking versus striking here, yeah, they're very level. But we're talking about mixed martial arts versus mixed martial arts. The level of experience and the gap of experience between the two is vast, to be honest. Alex Pereira coming in to only fight his 8th mixed martial arts fighting for a title here. Israel Adesanya will be his 25th fight inside, not the octagon necessarily, but mixed martial arts. I want Israel Adesanya to come in here and not put on a kickboxing fight. I want to see Israel Adesanya. How will he get back my attention again? He doesn't have to be exciting, but he can fight smart, because if you fight smart, that gets me fucking excited as well, to be honest. And we've seen 2 major differences in the last 2 performances of Alex Pereira. We've seen against Bruno Silva, we've seen a guy in front of Alex Pereira who was level changing, who was threatening with the takedown, and as a result of that, we've seen Alex Pereira get hit quite a lot in that fight. And we've seen Sean Strickland go in there, like Spencer mentioned, like an absolute numpty in his last fight and walk straight forward and cross his legs and throw lazy jabs and throw lazy hooks. And he got absolutely lit up. Probably one of the worst game plans that I've ever seen. Not pointing the fingers at any coaches, from a fighter that I've ever seen. I'm not getting into that.
To be clear, it wasn't the coach's game plan.
No. 100%, yeah. But look at
Sean does what.
Let's not get into it, lads. No, we're going down another rabbit hole. Bad performance from Sean Strickland. I think one of the worst performances, considering a win would have probably guaranteed him a shot at the title here as well. Massive failure. But Sean Strickland stood and played Alex Pereira's game, got knocked out. And I think you look back at those two fights and you see the keys to victory. And my question is it Israel Adesanya brave enough, confident enough to turn into a mixed martial artist here and try and put Alex Pereira on his back? And I'm going to ask Harry Powell that question.
The first thing I'm going to say is, if you take the accolades away from Francisco Trinaldo for worst game plan of all time one more time, I swear to God, I'm not doing this fucking thing.
High stakes though, Harry. Come on.
What about Glover Teixeira? You hated that one too, didn't you?
I fucking hated that one and all. Let's be frank. Okay, look, I mean, the answer to this is pretty simple. Israel Adesanya holds an insanely large reach for the division. Really long, gangly arms, really long, gangly legs. Yes, Pereira has the same one, but we saw against Bruno Silva, if you fake a takedown, even against Michailidis got to his hips and was like, why are you not falling over? And Alex was like, I don't want to. And he said, oh, okay, I guess I'll try something else maybe. The answer is obvious. The answer is variety. The answer is MMA. Alex Pereira has been training MMA for 2 years, 3 years max. There is nowhere near the gulf and wealth of knowledge that Israel Adesanya holds in his back pocket. Adesanya has a purple belt on jiu-jitsu. He was gifted that by Galvao. You can go and watch some of those rounds. And yes, Galvao is being nice to Izzy, obviously, and letting things happen. But you can quite clearly that Izzy knows what he's doing when he's on the ground, knows what he's doing when he's on top. Jiu-jitsu is obviously very different from wrestling, but I think that variety wins this fight against Pereira. The first thing that happens when you start to look for takedowns or you start to fake level changes is that the range changes. Your feet can't come so far apart. They have to come together. You have to be ready to down block. You have to be ready to sprawl. Obviously, Israel needs to be wary of knees if he chooses to shoot head inside. But if I'm Israel Adesanya, I'm going to try and teep him and pressure him and bait and feint shots and push him slightly further back towards the cage until I can run him there, avoid clinching if I can. I'd like to get straight to his hips. And if he pulls me up, I'd like to disengage and go back to the hips. But we're going to run singles, we're going to run doubles. And if we're not going to do that, we're just going to feint them. Even if you just get to a hip, you feel that pressure on the back of your head as he's down blocking and you just get out and carry on, he's going to have to think about variety. And that opens things up for Israel Adesanya. That makes the range change. That makes the shot selection from Pereira become narrower because he has to make sure that his elbows aren't away from his sides, that his hips aren't available. He has to make sure that he's not throwing naked kicks that can be caught and he gets run down with them. The game just changes. And I think that if Israel Adesanya comes in and offers an MMA style, it should be a walk in the park for him. But in the same vein, if he goes in and he decides that the octagon is his house and he's going to try to rectify the wrongs of those kickboxing fights, gentlemen, we're wearing 4-ounce gloves and Alex Pereira has an absolute fucking rocket in his hands. So I'm not going to make this out as to be one-sided because clearly Alex Pereira knows exactly what he's doing on the feet. But I do think that the diversity and the more depth of skill set lies with Adesanya, and it really, really depends on what type of style he chooses to come with.
Because to me, Spencer, it just seems from what I was watching that Alex Pereira is there for the taking if you can manage to get those hips. You know, you've seen against Sean Strickland, you know, it was a beautiful striking display. Like, I mean, opened up that fight, just throwing those little nonchalant leg kicks, throwing lovely body kicks, you know, targeting the midsection of the fight. And it was all leading to the knockout. That's all he was thinking about. He was like, I'm going to get you thinking about your right leg, your left leg, your body. And then when the time comes, what did he do? He was standing up straight. He level changed to give the illusion he was going to fire low. Down came the hand of Sean Strickland. Lights out. It's all over. that's going to be there for him against almost anybody. You know, obviously facing someone like Israel Adesanya, who is at extreme high level. But when we're talking about percentages here and the percentages of winning, you've got to think that getting the fight down here will give Israel the greatest percentage to win this fight. But before I hand it over to you, that being said, you know, if you watch back that second kickboxing fight, Israel Adesanya was winning that until he got clipped. So, you know, he has maybe that ego or that knowledge of thinking that he might be able to outstrike Alex Pereira, but then he also has in the back of his mind the flashbacks of getting absolutely sparked unconscious, which is the risk that you do run when you go and choose to stand with someone like Alex Pereira. Your thoughts on the fight as overall, please, Spencer?
I mean, I'm fascinated by it. Talking with Eric Nixick and Elliot Marshall for the Coach Conversation piece I put up on UFC.com this week about this fight. Like, so much of this is mental. So much of this is just about those kickboxing fights and how each of these two guys approach it. And having spoken with Alex Pereira yesterday about this fight and said, like, what kind of weight do those fights carry into this? And he's like, well, certainly they factor in. Like, I've been in there and I've beaten this guy twice, but I don't think I'm going to walk out there and just cross my arms and he's going to fall over unconscious. I still got to go and do things, but they certainly bring confidence and bring understanding of what he is capable of doing. Different arena, certainly. That left hand is probably more dangerous in a 4-ounce glove than it is in a great big kickboxing glove. Now, all kinds of other things that can factor in, but that plays a part for him. And for Izzy, if you watch the Countdown show, and I'm fortunate enough to get to watch some of the footage that doesn't make the program, he's spoken about, I've put that stuff behind me. It was years ago. It doesn't matter. Like, I don't hold any emotion to it. You lose fights. It's part of this business. We all move on. We've seen that from him in MMA in terms of losing that fight to Yan. And he comes back out and he wins 3 straight fights. We don't need to continue an argument about how entertaining they were. But he came right back and went out and defended his title 3 times. And so I think he's genuine when he says it was years ago. I'm not sitting here worried about it. But I tell you what, the first time that dude throws that left hand, you're getting a flashback and you're having a little bit of like, Jesus, I remember that thing. All right. He's even bigger now too. Like, he's filled out and he's thicker and he's stronger and he's more like, so much of this fight is going to come down to me, to the first 5 minutes and just what it looks like and who does what. Does Izzy come out and wrestle? Because as you said, it's a path to victory that is available to him and should be available to him in terms of depth of talent. Who's moving backwards? If this looks like a kickboxing fight, you gotta start maybe not leaning Alex Pereira, but it certainly makes it a coin flip. It certainly makes it a very, very interesting fight. And the more it looks like an MMA fight, the more it favors Izzy. And so some of that is execution. Some of that is mental. I mean, I have a feeling, my guess would be that we see Izzy come out and look to wrestle early. We see him, as Harry said, throwing a lot of those shots to the midsection, looking to drain that gas tank, looking to get this into 3, 4, and 5, where he's extremely comfortable. And we haven't seen Alex Pereira. But I mean, that dude carries that cannon in that left hand that can just change everything. And if Izzy gets buzzed by it once and starts having flashbacks to Sao Paulo, this gets real interesting real quick.
It absolutely does, Sean. And yeah, I'm just curious to hear about your opinion of the fight overall, because, you know, that to me, what Spencer said is probably the perfect game plan that you got to do. You don't have to like go balls to the wall and get the takedown, but you at least initiate some grappling exchanges. Even if you're working in the clinch, try and tire out arms, try and make blood flow to arms, make your arms heavier, lose a bit of pop. Plus, you know, we don't know how Alex Pereira is going to perform in the championship rounds here, if it gets to the championship rounds. Who are you expecting to see get their hand raised, and how do you see the fight going overall, Shawnee?
The biggest thing I would disagree with anything that the three of you have said there was Harry when he said it's not a one-sided fight. I think this is a massively one-sided fight in favor of Adesanya. Like, we had the old disagreement there at the start of the podcast, but I think all of that is down to, right, we all would agree, I would say, that Adesanya is really, really good at winning fights the easiest way he possibly can, right? Whether that's standing fucking at the end of his jab for 5 rounds or knocking someone out, right? He will win the fight the easiest way he can. If that is kickboxing Alex Pereira on the outside and staying away from him, he'll do that for 5 rounds. And I think that will be game plan 1A. I'm honestly, I think it will. I think if that doesn't necessarily work out or isn't working out at 95 to 100%, I think he will change up and I think he will wrestle. So I think there's a good percentage chance that, you know, maybe 20 to 30% that it doesn't happen and he will try to wrestle. I think he's well able. As Harry said, he's acumen on the ground. He's been, you know, my guy Andrew McGahan has been talking about him for a long time, being good on the ground. And I think the kickboxing will help him get the fight to the ground. We saw Michailidis and other people only want to take him down. Not going to happen because he knows it's fucking coming. Against Adesanya, not necessarily. The other sides of it, I went back and I watched the kickboxing matches, and you know what, you can mostly write them off. Spencer 100% correct when he says about Pereira's size. He looked tiny and he looked like a 155 or something. Honestly, it was like the machinist or something in there. He looked so thin. He's very much filled out now. That'll help his power. That'll help his ability to take a shot. That'll help everything. The other part of it, you know, you were all kind of talking about length and size and the reach advantage from Adesanya. I actually think Adesanya in those 2 kickboxing matches did way better when he was fighting inside rather than outside. Like, I don't think Pereira was actually able to live with him at all when they got inside, apart from when he got knocked spark out. But that was kind of on the break coming from outside. The best place Pereira is actually at, which also leads you, if like you're expecting an exciting fight here come forward from Adesanya, when you're looking at someone like Pereira who's so good on the break, there's always going to naturally be breaks if you don't want to clinch and you're throwing lots of shots going forward, which is weird because throwing lots of shots going forward is where Adesanya has the biggest advantage over Pereira, in my opinion, after looking at those 2 kickboxing matches. But he's not going to want to do that because we know what happened the last time. The mentality side for me, I think we've Leon Edwards against Usman coming up here, possibly the rematch straight away. I think mentality will be a massive thing in that. You just got knocked out a few months ago against the guy. The other guy's the champion. You know, all of that. This happened so long ago that it would have a mental effect, I think, if they both had similar careers or they both, you know, hadn't fought much since or whatever. But I think the fact, and I put this, the Paul Hughes fight last week, I think was a great example of this. I said coming out of that fight, I'm kind of worried about Paul Hughes. I think he's taken this mentally so bad after he lost the split decision the first time. I think by the time the fight came around, it'd been cancelled once. They both had 2 other fights. They, you know, picked up titles and all. That part of his life, he had kind of gotten past it by that. For Adesanya, he's gotten past it. He's reached the top of the mountain, and now we're criticizing he's not good enough at being brilliant. You know, that's where we've gotten rid of Israel Adesanya, where we're arguing about this great fighter isn't fucking great. You know, that's where. So I don't think he'd be too worried about that. Now, will he be worried about the left hook? Absolutely. We all argued again at the start of this podcast, but we were all arguing about how fucking tactically amazing Israel Adesanya is and his coaches. No one's going to say anything bad about his coaches' game plans. There might be a boring game plan, but you know what? They're a winning game plan unless he meets someone, you know, very, you know, you talk about underrated. Jan Blachowicz is a guy who's underrated, especially in that fight coming into it and after it. But he will be tactically aware, and tactically afraid is not the right word, but tactically aware of that left hook and all the big shots. And I wonder how he will get through it. I think it's a very interesting fight for Adesanya and how he fights. And I like all MMA coaches for me are a bit snake oily. They all, whenever I hear all of them talking, I'm always like, okay, yeah, you're trying to sell the fact that you have the answer there. And you know what? You don't really, you know, you don't. You can look at fights, you can tactically break them down, you can be smart in certain ways, but if you don't have a great fucking fighter going in there, you will be your rubbish too. And that's a fact. And I think Israel Adesanya he's a great fighter, and I think he'll show he's a great fighter in this fight. I think he will beat Pereira to the punch early. And if he beats him to the punch early, and I mean, when I say punch, I mean one punch. I mean like the jab, the odd right hand, the leg kicks. I think we're very, very unlikely to see massive combination throwing here from Adesanya, although I actually think he can win that fight. If he does do that, I don't think we'll see it. I think we'll see a safe outside 5-round 50-45 here from Adesanya. And if we don't see that coming to pass early, I do think we'll see a takedown, and he's 14-1 to win by submission. And that's your flyer of the week from Sean Sheen.
He has always said,
Andrew McGann will be all over that.
He has always said that he wants to win by submission. And if there's ever a fight to win by submission, it's this one. You know what I mean?
This is the one. This is the one. And just to kind of say what you're saying about coaches, I listened to Eugene Behrman and Helwani yesterday, and I was massively impressed with everything that came out of that man's mouth. I mean, when you're talking about trying to keep a guy with the level of ego of Israel Adesanya kind of teetered down a little bit and keep his feet on the floor, I really honestly don't think there's a better guy than Eugene Behrman to do that from what I heard. So if anyone hasn't listened to that, I definitely recommend go and just, I had not sat down for 30 minutes. I'd listened to him talk 5 or 10 minutes in little spurts before, but to listen to him on Helwani there earlier on this week was, I was really impressed with what I heard. And I tend to agree. I think, this is Israel Adesanya's fight to lose. And I think he holds the cards and how he can do it, to be honest, and how exciting the fight is. And we'll break it all down. The guys will do that on the takeaways, and the lads will do it on the big podcast on Sunday. But that's it. That's the main event. We almost fell out. We almost had to we almost had to fucking press pause on the preview show there. But we shall move on to the co-main event, which Spencer, to me, has kind of this kind of similar aura around it, where we're talking about levels of excitement, because Carla Esparza was in a real stink fest in her last fight against Rose Namajunas. But to really be a hypocrite and to counteract what we were saying about Israel Adesanya, and to counteract what Sean was saying, you know what, maybe against someone like Rose Namajunas, that's what you have to do. And maybe against someone like Zhang Weili.
That's what I was saying. We're talking about.
That's what you have to do as well. I don't think she's going to want to come in here and stand and bang with Zhang Weili. But for me, Spencer, look, at the mini story that's going on here behind the scenes is kind of Carla Esparza's battle with the UFC, and they begrudgingly gave her the title shot against Rose Namajunas after a 5-fight win streak. No one expected her to win. The minute she got that win, immediately they couldn't wait to get Zhang Weili in there somehow. Zhang Weili got the win against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, but it seems like it's Carla Esparza versus the world here, not alone Zhang Weili, and it's a real fascinating encounter in the co-main event.
Yeah, everybody, it feels, expects this to go one of a couple ways. It's either going to be another stink fest, or as the kids would say, cheeks, like it was for Carla Esparza. That was for you, Harry. Like it was for Carla Esparza and Rose Namajunas. Or it's going to be like the last time Carla Esparza tried to defend a title, and she got absolutely butchered by Joanna Jędrzejczyk at UFC 185 in Dallas. I think there's actually a third way, and it's the part that makes me really interested about this fight. Can Carla Esparza just go out here and wrestle Zhang Weili for a couple rounds? I don't think she can. Physically, athletically, talent-wise, I don't think she can. I don't think it will happen. I think she will try very early, and Zhang Weili will just shuck her off and be like, go away. Let me punch you in the face. And I think it's going to turn into kind of a repeat. Like Carla Esparza is going to have those 2 title reigns where she won the title twice, beating the same person, and then she walked out and lost the title, getting absolutely massacred both times. But I'm really interested to see those first couple exchanges, because the one thing Carla Esparza does well that you have to give her credit for is she chain wrestles like nobody's business. It's not, I'm in on this single and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to hang out and I'm going to try and try and try. If it's not there, she moves to the next thing. If it's not there, she moves to the next thing, and she just keeps going. And that's how you're going to tire Zhang Weili out. That's how you're going to use some of that energy. That's how you're going to draw some of that power away. And if Carla Esparza can do that early and do that successfully, this could, in theory, become interesting. But I don't think it will.
Yeah. Do you know what? I couldn't have explained.
It's unfortunate, right? Like I feel bad for Carla, genuinely, because she is that person that's sort of just overlooked in this division as a 2-time champion who on overall has had a very good career, but just isn't the same as these other champions that we've seen.
Yeah, it's like, I don't remember a more, and no offense to Carla, but this is how I truly feel. I don't remember a more underwhelming champion in the UFC, bar Nico Montano or someone like that. I mean, it really boils down to that. Look at Spencer talked about the nitty gritty of this fight, Harry. Stylistically, how do you expect these two women to kind of match up, and what are you expecting to see in there? Look at Zhang Weili is on a real good run. She seems to have leveled up after those double losses. She seems more assured of herself. She seems to have kind of gotten her ducks in a row. And, she has the chance to come back here and become 2-time champion again.
It's a horrendous matchup for Carla Esparza. Carla Esparza, Spencer's right, she chain wrestles well. But the first thing you've got to do is get Zhang Weili to the cage, because I don't think you're going to take her down in open space. I think she's too athletic. I think she's too powerful. And I think her balance is too good. We saw against Rose Namajunas that the takedowns weren't as conventional as we thought. And when there was grappling in the open space, Zhang Weili was able to get to Muay Thai clinches and then trip Rose Namajunas a number of times from those clinches. Now, Rose did a good job of using the jiu-jitsu stuff and getting back up and doing the things and, grand, whatever. Zhang Weili did similar when Rose was trying to sweep and reverse those positions. But I think in open cage, if Carla is going to jump on a single or jump on a double or do the conventional wrestling things, what we want to be doing is grabbing them and then running Zhang Weili immediately to the cage. Immediately to the cage, try and keep her there, and then try and fill her with lactic acid. I just feel, though, that the power of Zhang Weili, the strength, the athleticism, she's going to get wrist control or double unders, and she's going to pull Carla up, and then we're in a Muay Thai, and then she's probably going to reverse her, and then she's probably going to trip her, and Carla on her back is not the same as Carla on top, and it's just a really, really tough matchup for Carla Esparza. I also think that should Carla choose to wrestle and chain wrestle, Zhang Weili has good enough hips that she'll spread her base and she'll start to land elbows, and Carla's going to have to make decisions and panic decisions at that, and it's going to be tough. And the real problem here is that I'm not sure that Zhang Weili is going to respect the power of Carla Esparza on the feet to then open up the wrestling exchanges that maybe Carla will. And you do not want to be taking naked shots against Zhang Weili, because the knees, the down blocking, the front headlock game, and just general chaos will meet you. You will be at your behest. And if Carla can get through this and pick up a win, it will undoubtedly be the best performance of her career and the best win of her career. But I really struggle to see how this is going to go the way of Carla Esparza.
Yeah, I tend to agree there. Harry, one last question before we go. From what you've seen so far, and it's something that interests me because I feel that Carla Esparza does have some underrated strength. Who do you expect to be, and I think I know the answer to this question, but who do you expect to be the more stronger athlete in there on Saturday night?
I think mechanically, if Carla gets to her positions, she's very, very tough to deal with. When she gets to a body lock, when she gets her head connected to her hip, and when her hips are high and she's driving, she's certainly mechanically very, very strong. But I mean, Zhang Weili looks like a freak athlete, right? A freak athlete. We saw a high crotch Francis Ngannou the other day, and Francis was saying, like, I really asked her not to do this. He said, I'm 295 pounds and I really didn't want her to be injured. And she just lifts him like it's a sack of potatoes. Like, I think pound for pound, strength for strength, if you put them both in the weights room, Zhang Weili dominates Carla there. And like I said, mechanical tightness is an absolute thing, and really, really is helpful in these situations. But I don't think that it's going to be enough.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be enough either. And the key thing for me, Sean, in this one is, in the last fight where Carla took on Rose Namajunas, Carla Esparza was allowed to implement her game plan, and that was due to the lack of activity that Rose Namajunas kind of presented to her. She was gun shy. She didn't fire off. that's not going to be an issue with Zhang Weili in this fight. And I think that's going to prove a big problem for Carla Esparza here. How do you kind of see the fight playing out? I heard you speaking on the QAA. You're not completely ruling Esparza out in this fight, but it's truly a difficult task for her.
It is, yeah. First of all, on that Esparza and Muniz fight, geez, if that was either of their game plans, I'd be, I think Carla probably wanted to get inside and take her down in that fight, and Rose probably wanted to get inside and land a few shots. And no one did anything. We were 5 rounds later, so we could, but anyway. Look, someone asked me in the Q&A, is there a path to victory for Carla Esparza? And there undoubtedly is a path to victory. Because, look, the thing about it is, right, we saw that 25 minutes. It's etched into our fucking memory. When Harry was thinking up of a fight earlier on, of a boring fight. What was the fight he thought of? Fucking Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis. Because that's another one that's etched into our memory for shitness, right? And sometimes we forget coming into that fight, the Namajunas Esparza fight, that what was I guarantee you if you listened to us in the preview for that show, we would have been saying, look, Namajunas probably going to win it. She's going to have the better wrestling and all it. The better striking and everything, and maybe even the better jiu-jitsu. But if the fight hits the ground and Esparza can take her down, that's her path to victory. Right? We kind of forgot that with all the madness. Like, that very good top game wrestling game still exists. She's a very good wrestler, very good at getting top, very strong. Maybe not necessarily okay in the gym. And I think she'd actually maybe shock people with how strong she is, even compared to Zhang Weili. But there's no doubt about it, in the wrestling realm, there aren't many people as strong as her there in that division. So there's definitely a path to victory for her there. I think Zhang Weili will dominate this fight and win it. The one, and the two lads have broken down, the three of you have broken that down, so there's no need for me to go a little bit further, but I pick out one little bit of hope for Carla Esparza. We saw in that last fight, she can be very defensive or very, non-committal and, doesn't do much, with the greatest respect to her, from a far out distance if she can't get a wrestling. Even when she does get the fight to the ground, very dominant top, doesn't really do much. A fighter like Zhang Weili is not the type of fighter who will stand there like Rose Namajunas and also do nothing, right? So, to make another soccer analogy here, we all see teams playing against like Man United, Man City. They're fucking 10 men behind the ball, and next thing your centre back is coming forward, and they're crossing the ball from the left and they're breaking it, and what leaves massive openings at the back, and one ball over the top, goal, 1-0, and you're after getting dominated. Is there a chance here like that Carla Esparza just does nothing, and Zhang Weili's like, all right, I'm gonna have to take a few chances here, goes the opposite of Israel Adesanya, and throws a few high kicks, slips on her arse, ends up on the bottom and gets rear naked choke or something. Like, and maybe not even rear naked choke, but gets taken down once, held on the ground for 4 minutes, is tired as fuck when she gets back up. And the next round comes out and it's a double leg from Carla Esparza and she's putting her back again. Like, if you're looking for methods of victory and paths to victory, I think I'm after, convincing. Let's have a little bit there. No, I haven't said it. I do think Zhang Weili will win. I think she's going to hit too hard early. I think she's very good takedown defense and all of that. But you know what? There is a path to victory there. There is a path to victory. It might be a mistake from Zhang Weili, but no one better than Carla Esparza to take advantage of that mistake if it lands her on top. So there you go.
Yeah, very, very interesting fight. Like, I mean, there was only 67 strikes thrown. I know Harry is a stats man there. Only 67 strikes thrown in that Carla Esparza.
It seems like a lot.
Well, like, only it seems like an awful lot. I would have expected a little bit less watching back that fight, to be honest. I don't know what kind of strikes they were counting, but Zhang Weili is throwing an average of in between 80 to 120 strikes per fight, and with Carla Esparza coming out after only throwing 30 strikes against Rose Namajunas, she's going to have to up that output an awful lot, especially against Zhang Weili. And I'm excited to see how she does. She is not getting her due. She hasn't got her dues as a two-time champion in the division. We said that already. One way to do it, one way to gain everybody's respect is going out there and taking out Zhang Weili, no matter what way she does. There ain't going to be no criticizing for a boring fight if you're going out there against Zhang Weili to completely counteract our thoughts and opinions at the start of this preview show. But look, we're talking about strikes being thrown here, guys, and I can guarantee you one thing: it ain't going to be a problem in Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler fight, because these boys are going to go ham on each other, and I cannot wait for this fight. Seanie, this is, as you called it, an absolute fucking barn burner.
Yeah, more than likely. I don't know why, right? We're getting so positive about this. I feel like I have to draw myself in a little bit, because, like, you know what I'm kind of secretly doing? I'm kind of drawing myself, you know, lads, it mightn't be as good. And then when it's amazing, I'm like, oh, fuck it, yes, it was all right. I have a small feeling, and I don't think the fight will be bad either way, but I have a slight feeling that Michael Chandler will actually
fight smartly this time.
A little bit smarter, because he come into the UFC, right? And his MO has been, I've done all I need to do in Bellator. I'm going to come in here and have a memorable career in the UFC, right? And he wins over Dan Hooker and the ghost of Tony Ferguson, right? And I feel like time won't make those wins look good. And his 2 fights inside of that were very, very good as well, and very memorable. But I feel like a guy like Michael Chandler, who, is a guy who obviously cares what people think about him, is the type of fella who'll want to get a win over a name in the UFC. Now, I'm not sure Dustin Poirier is what he is anymore. I think Dustin Poirier himself, just the way he talks and acts kind of these days, it feels like he's on the way out, and he kind of wants to be on the way out, if you get me. Not that his skills or his body or anything or that, but just maybe mentally a little bit. And also, from Michael Chandler's point of view, he wants to have exciting fights. I don't think he's an idiot either. And he knows how hard Dustin Poirier hits, and he knows, maybe he isn't. I don't know, Spencer has a different opinion. But like, if you go into a boxing match, throwing bomb, a fucking Dana White slap fighting match against Dustin Poirier, you're probably getting knocked out, like. And maybe he will anyway, and I kind of hope he does, because fair play to him. Like, I had great respect. I tweeted after one or both of the Justin Gaethje fight. He fought the stupidest game plan. We talk about stupid game plans. There's one, Michael Chandler against Gaethje, and I applauded him for it, because it led to a fucking fantastic fight, and I continue to applaud him for it. But I think there might be a little bit of a different game plan here. I think he might be maybe a little wrestling a little bit more, maybe looking for the body a little bit more, maybe picking his shots a little bit more. He kind of did that against Hooker a little bit, Poirier is a different sort of matchup, though, and I do think Poirier will win the fight. I think his power will be a little bit too much. I think he's a better gas tank than Chandler, although Poirier is kind of a second win guy. He does kind of gas a little bit, he comes back, whereas Chandler, he can fight. We've seen him fight 5 rounds again. He is in the UFC now, and the UFC have a very good the UFC are very good, at stopping lads who were previously very good at going 5 rounds, at now gone 5 rounds sometimes. So it's interesting. This is only 3 rounds as well, but should be an interesting fight. Should be a fun fight. Will be a fun fight. Maybe not as brilliant as everyone is saying it will be a fight of the year sort of thing, but I would expect probably fight at night, and I do think Poirier will win. I think he'll have too much power, but that's what I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. There is an avenue that I'd like to go down after hearing what you said, because I've been kind of flirting with this idea myself as well, whereas that, Dustin Poirier has been there and done that inside the UFC. So, his mentality is something that I will kind of question coming into this fight slightly. He has never won the title, but he's got the money belt twice off Conor McGregor. So, he's not in there to try and make some money. Obviously, that legacy and having the belt around his waist, I'm just wondering how much, and I've not heard their interviews yet this week, and I'll definitely go and listen to them after this. But what I'm thinking here, Spencer, is, with a new champion at the fold, is the division is kind of freshening up a bit. Are these guys going to come in here maybe with the thoughts of going on this one last title run, or with the chance of getting in there, maybe even with a win in this fight, getting a reward of the title shot next? And I'm wondering, who's going to want it more? Will it be Dustin Poirier, who's been there and tasted that, or is it going to be Michael Chandler, who is relatively new inside the UFC and is hungry to be kind of in those positions, maybe more than what Poirier is coming into this fight?
It's going to be interesting, and I honestly don't have an answer, because as I sit here and think about it, yeah, sure, of course, from a final career achievement kind of idea. You think and you expect each of these guys to be like, cool, new guys at the top. I haven't fought him yet. That's what I need to do. That's the one last thing that I need to kind of, for Dustin Poirier, close out my UFC resume. Of course, he was an interim champion, but never an undisputed. And for Michael Chandler, gets him a belt in the UFC, then starts opening up conversations about greatest lightweight of all time because of the run he had in Bellator and all of these different things that people can argue and fight about. But like, there's also the prospect of, if you're Dustin Poirier or Michael Chandler, do you want to go and fight Islam Makhachev and have that dude maul you? Like, Dustin fought Khabib and it went very, very poorly. And Islam is just younger version of Khabib. Like, it will be the same thing. And if you're Dustin Poirier, do you want to go and lose another title opportunity? And if you're Michael Chandler, the guy that's doing backflips and, you know, cribbing Ric Flair and most entertaining fighter in the division and all of these different things, I don't know that he's necessarily in this purely for championships. I think he's in this for money and big fights and big moments. And so I think each of these guys are looking at this as win this grudge match and then set myself up for the next big money fight that I can find, whoever that may be. Michael Chandler, obviously, I think he's sort of targeting Conor McGregor. Dustin's had his time with Conor. We don't know what's next there, but I don't know that this is want to go, maybe immediate want to go and fight for a title. I think the UFC will look at it and want to maybe make that happen because some of the other options aren't as mainstream appealing as either of these two guys. But I don't know if either of these guys are in a rush to go and fight Islam Makhachev.
Justice for Benny.
Yeah, I'm not sure anyone is in a rush to fight Islam.
I agree. Benny is, but I think everybody here agrees Benny deserves his shot even 100%. Above Alex Volkanovski. Like, get 100%. That dude his title fight.
Yeah, please, right. Please. Harry, you know, Spencer alluded to, you know, the kind of game plan mentality that Michael Chandler has kind of brought into his UFC tenure so far. And for me, for a guy who didn't care about Michael Chandler when he signed for the UFC to a guy right now who is excited to see him fight, I mean, it worked. And I give him maximum respect for going in there with the attitude that he's brought in to the octagon, with, you know, wanting to fight these top level guys in the lightweight division, number 2, and then just going out there and putting in performance after performance and, you know, doing what we want Israel Adesanya to do per se, and taking a few chances and putting on these exciting fights. I'm never going to miss an opportunity to say that either. What are your thoughts on this fight and maybe in particular Michael Chandler's approach to his UFC career so far?
Well, I'll give 2 answers. I'll give an answer as a fan, and the answer as a fan is I'm all for it. I'll give an answer as an analyst, and that's that it's incredibly frustrating to watch Michael Chandler fight because he has so much potential and so many skills and such a vast depth to his both athletic and skill potential. And then he wastes it and gets into brawls with guys like Justin Gaethje that he probably could take down, and he makes the fight against Tony Ferguson closer than it needed to be. And, you know, he goes in and absolutely storms through Dan Hooker, and you're like, okay, cool, that'll do. I want that guy. Give me that guy. I want that guy. And then he goes in and opts for entertainment. And I think this is where the balance is, right? As I say, from a fan, I watched back the Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler fight twice. One, because I started to watch it, tried to watch it as an analyst, and I was like, nah, fuck this fight's too good. And I just watched it, right? And I really enjoyed it. And then I was like, okay, now I actually have to take notes and I actually have to look at the fight. And there were so many moments in that Gaethje fight where Chandler is making a conscious decision to be entertaining and not to fight Gaethje in a way that would give him the win. And it feels almost reminiscent of Gaethje when he first came into the UFC. He came into the UFC, has some unbelievable performances, some unbelievably entertaining fights that were horrendous for his long-term health. And then we know the story. He sits down with Whitman and Whitman says, look, you can be good enough and you could win a title. And clearly he wasn't, but you can be good enough and you can get yourself into title contention, but you have to change your style. You have to become a different fighter. And he turned in a performance against Tony Ferguson. And yes, okay, it was the beginning of the ghost of Tony Ferguson. It's the fella that put Tony Ferguson 6 foot in the grave so that his ghost would rise like a phoenix ashes. But he still went in and did that. Michael Chandler's 36. He's been very vocal about wanting to be a specific type of fighter in the UFC. And as much as we question Dustin Poirier's mindset and where he wants to be and who he wants to be going forward in the next couple of fights in his UFC tenure, I question the same for Michael Chandler. Like, Michael Chandler knows that going in there and putting on vastly entertaining fights is going to get him a Conor McGregor, or it's going to get him performance of the night bonuses. It's going to get him a contract that's going to allow him to feed his family for the rest of his life and probably their life. And I don't know that he's going to want to change that at 36. And frankly, and you know, I've talked about this on the One Man Booth, and it will come out tomorrow. And if anyone's bothered, go and listen to it. It's a long one.
Definitely go and listen to it.
Go listen to it.
Bother yourself.
Don't bother.
I'll go into
you prick.
About why I think Michael Chandler is a fighter that should be way better than he is, and I air my frustrations of the way in which he fights and the choices that he makes in comparison to the choices that he could make and the fruitfulness that they could provide him. If I can give just a quick spiel of how I think this is, I think Poirier is just way better in the way that they're going to choose to fight. Even if Michael Chandler comes in and chooses to fight technically, I think that the way that he moves his feet, the footwork choices he makes, the lack of commitment to jabs and feints and angling footwork is going to cost him against a guy like Dustin Poirier, who can switch hit and angle change and work in the pocket like he does. Of course, he's got a rocket of a right hand. He's got a rocket of a left hand, but I just think he's open to be hit. And we saw him at times try and fight technically against Justin Gaethje when he was damaged, and Gaethje just picked him apart. And I feel like that's a big problem against Dustin Poirier.
Indeed it is. I'm looking forward to that fight. That will kind of prop up the middle of the main card. Next, Seanie, you've been very outspoken about Frankie Edgar, and you're wanting of him not to compete anymore. I think the proof is in the pudding, given previous performances that we've seen from Frankie, is that, look, it's pretty clear that he's not the same fighter as he was. His chin is basically gone at this stage. And I just hope coming into this fight with Chris Gutierrez that it's not one of these sad moments. But unfortunately, when you put yourself in the firing line, there's a very high chance of it here. And what you're thinking, what's your overall thoughts on all of this? I'm sure you've got a bunch to say.
Yeah, look, I've spoken about Frankie for a good few years, and I think a lot of the people, when I started saying it the first, were like critical of what I was saying, saying I was disrespectful to Frankie or that I didn't like him or anything like that. I think maybe people need to maybe walk back those comments a little bit, if we're being honest, because look what's happened to Frankie over the last few years. He's taken damage, that's not going to be reparable, unfortunately. And to see that he's still doing it, not only did he make those mistakes for the last 3-4 years, he's been thrown in there again. It's saddening, sickening to honestly to see it. Like I went and I watched Chris Gutierrez a little bit today, and I looked at him, and like that Dana Batragal fight and other fights as well. And he looks like the type of guy who, if this is prime Frankie Edgar, he's there for the taking, really, for a prime Frankie Edgar. And like I remember going into a couple of the fights for Frankie Edgar recently and thinking, look, Frankie Edgar, if he can fight the way he fights, he'll beat this guy. And then invariably he hasn't been recently. This is another step down again. Cheeto at the time, obviously, that I suppose that loss or that fight looks better now. At the time, I think a lot of people were kind of saying, "Oh, what's Frankie doing in there with Cheetah?" type of thing. But Chris Gutierrez, look, a very good record and a good fighter. But if he beats Frankie Edgar, and they were talking about it being the retirement fight and all, it's just another step down in a career that's taken many steps down. And unfortunately, they're becoming, he was the guy who was losing lopsided decisions to the best in the world in Jose Aldo after winning a title, after losing close decisions to, the likes of Vincent Henderson, who had a massive height advantage over him. Frankie Edgar in his day was a great fighter, and now he's got in there and a lot of people are expecting him to lose against a guy who hasn't even shown he's a good fighter yet. No, he might be, and he might become a great fighter. I'm not saying anything about Chris Gutierrez, but it's kind of sad that we have that. Like, the thing about this is, right, if anyone goes and watch that Dana Batragal, Chris Gutierrez fight, Batragal fights like an old school Frankie Edgar, not the most, technical striking in the world, but puts his all into it, goes forward, and causes trouble for him in the early parts of that. And Gutierrez is trying to counter and kind of missing, and as we, you see the result there, he knocks him out in the second round. I think Frankie will probably walk into one of those counters at some stage. Like, it's a fight, I think, in the first 2 or 3 minutes could look good for Frankie, and everyone could be thinking, Frankie's back, and then he'll walk into one shot and it'll be lights out. If it's not, and if he can come back and if he can keep landing those shots, there is a possibility. There is a possibility, but I wouldn't say a high probability. I hope, and I'm sure you'll reiterate this, lads, I hope Frankie Edgar doesn't get hurt too badly in this fight. And I don't like saying that in terms of you're going into a fight and look, what happens sometimes. But Frankie Edgar's given enough and done enough that he shouldn't be in this position. That was my big problem with the whole Anderson Silva thing a couple of weeks ago, going in boxing against some YouTuber. Like, it's not only that I hope he doesn't get hurt, it's that it's just sad that someone who has had so much respect and done so much in the sport still has to do it. Like, that they still have to do it after all this. Like, we've all seen it in all different sports where people show what they are. They show that their legs are gone, that they don't have the speed anymore. I'm sure, maybe in baseball, they can't bowl as fucking fast as they want, straight or throw or whatever the fuck it's called. And, they get half season from their team and then they're gonzo, and unfortunately in MMA, we just keep seeing the person get older and older and worse, and it's sadder and sadder and sadder. And not to leave you on the way of lads, but it's hard not to see that at the weekend.
Yeah, it's a strange and kind of a sad situation as well. Like, I mean, when I think about Frankie Edgar, and I have fond memories of his lightweight run, and to think that all the damage that he took, and in particular those Gray Maynard fights as well, in those fights, the amount of damage he took, and then we're here 10 years later and he's fighting his last fight after a couple of knockout losses. It's hard for me to digest, to be honest, and I'm sure it's just as hard for you to digest as well, Spencer. But like Sean said, the thing about this fight, and I think there's never been a truer word spoken on this preview show. Yeah, Frankie Edgar looks good until he gets hit. But the fact of the matter is his ability to absorb those shots has gone, and it's sad to see. And I think you're the same as all of us. We don't want to see a serious injury for Frankie Edgar coming into this fight.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the run coming into it and it tells you everything you need to know, right? The one win is a questionable decision against Pedro Munoz. 4 of the 4 losses, 3 of them are finishes in the first round. The last 2 of them are vicious. Sorry, Marlon Vera fight isn't in the first round; it's in the third round. But the last 2 of them are just horrific finishes, where you just, after the Corey Sandhagen fight, I thought it was enough, because that was brutal, and brutal in a sense of these things happen in MMA, and we see knockouts like that, and it's part of what you sign up for. But like, okay, we can be done. We've seen Frankie do all the things that he's done over the course of his career, and I don't need to see more. And then he fights Cheeto, and it's at home last year in New York City. It's, you know what I mean? It's this same event last year. So 53 weeks later, he's back for more against Chris Gutierrez. Like, I know you want to have the fan in me hopes that Frankie Edgar, we can get kick in the door and he runs out to the cage. My dog's name is Biggie. Like, literally after the Notorious B.I.G., when I announced we adopted him on Instagram, I played Kick in the Door. It is one of my favorite entrances. I love Frankie Edgar to pieces. I hope this goes well. There's not much of me that believes it will go well. And that's really unfortunate. And it just, Seanie said, you hate to see people that have to do this. I don't always know that it's have to. I think they choose to.
It's a want for Frankie,
and it's a want to. And I get it. I understand it on a core emotion level. I get it. This is one of those ones where you just wish everybody threw themselves in front of this and just said, nah, man, because chasing happy endings is tough in this sport. And like
next to impossible, I would say.
For this to end with a loss to Chris, and like, look, it feels bad to say, and I feel shitty saying it this way, but like for this to end with a loss to Chris Gutierrez at MSG, like this is the first time Chris Gutierrez has been on a pay-per-view main card. He's solid fighter, unbeaten in 7, like good run of late, but like,
I mean, even a win at this stage, guys, isn't it? Like, even a win, like, what are we going to prove? You're just trying to, like Spencer said, you're trying to find a happy ending to your story. And look at Harry, the UFC have tried to manufacture this fight for Frankie to give him the best opportunity that he can. You don't want to see him in there with top 5 or top 10 or even a top 15. Is Chris Gutierrez ranked at this stage? Is he in the lower ends of the rankings? I'm not too sure. He's not. So that's what the UFC have tried to do here, Harry. But you know what? It doesn't always work out that way, doesn't it? Not.
The UFC are doing what they do best, and they're building a fight where the UFC wins. If Frankie Edgar comes out, gets a win over Chris Gutierrez, we can hopefully wave goodbye on a win, and it's a fairy tale, and it's MSG, and the things happen. If not, Chris Gutierrez, that's 8 in a row, probably 2 finishes in his last 2, and they get to play the Frankie Edgar whatever, and we might see Chris Gutierrez in the co-main event of a fight night card next time out, or we might see Chris Gutierrez in, a whatever. The UFC always wins, and the UFC, whilst they might be in the back of their mind architecting a nicer, cleaner, safer matchup for Frankie Edgar, we all know, and it's right to say, Frankie Edgar over the last 5 fights has taken far, far, far too much punishment. Everyone, when we saw Brian Ortega, and this wasn't Brian Ortega 2.0 with the shaved hair coming out looking like a Mexican boxer. This was Brian Ortega who lifted Frankie Edgar off his feet with an uppercut that we didn't even know that he could throw. And the alarm bells were ringing then, and Seanie was talking about it then. And this to me is one of the darker parts of MMA, where I actually kind of agree with Sean that we say the word have to, and I'd replace the word with a compulsion. There is a compulsion to these fighters, specifically the Frankie Edgar era of fighter, have come from a different lineage, a different type of MMA. The world that they grew up in inside MMA was very, very different. It wasn't an athletic endeavor. It wasn't even a sport for the most part. MMA was fighting, right? And Frankie Edgar has been through the eons of MMA, and he's come through that, and he's now at the precipice where he's being replaced, and he's being replaced by athletes and sports people. And that's very, very hard for a man to take. And it's very, very hard when the core fibers of the foundations of your being are fighting. And when you realize that, 50,000 years of age that he is, that your body doesn't move the same and your chin doesn't move the same. And you've had to drop 2 divisions just to keep competitive, and you're still getting finished. This is not a place that we should be accepting Frankie Edgar to be. And I know that the answer is very difficult, and there's autonomy and there's choice in this for every fighter. But I feel, like Seanie said, that there should be an echo chamber of support for these people. There should be a route out. And I hope that the route out for Frankie Edgar doesn't leave him with more severe injuries than he already has.
Indeed. Very well said. Yeah, look, it's not a nice conversation to have, but it's a necessary conversation to have. And I think the fucking sad reality of the situation is we're probably going to have this conversation about numerous other fighters in our time as well. And it's sad. It's a sad part. But you know what? We shall move on. We will try and up the tempo here now a little bit from these next couple of fights. We'll try and up the mood. You know, we have to be real when we expect to be real. Look, we were talking about a guy like Claudio Puelles, Spencer, coming in to his last two fights, and we were saying, surely he's not going to go out there and knee bar anybody. Surely he can't go out and do there again. Yet alone, he comes out there, the knee bar specialist goes out there and is knee bar motherfuckers like it's going out of fashion. And he's coming in here against Dan Hooker in a very interesting stylistic matchup, I have to say. Dan Hooker gladly has made the choice to move back up to the lightweight division. I think that's probably the perfect, not that I wouldn't say the perfect move. I think the perfect move for him would be not cutting any weight at all, but at least it's not down to 145. That went disastrous in his last fight. He's coming in refreshed, rejuvenated. His coach, Eugene Behrman, spoke about the difficulties that he had to deal with during the pandemic, especially in New Zealand, Australia, and those parts of the world where restrictions are very tight, wherein basically Dan Hooker trained in his own garage for Islam Makhachev. And he's reckoned that him and all the rest of the city kickboxing stars, their level of progression was minimized by 50%, which was a very interesting thing to say, due to the levels of training. He's back on the horse. He's looking for another run. He's coming in against Claudio Puelles. And I think, it's an interesting fight. And I'm interested to hear why Claudio Puelles is your fighter to watch this week coming into this card.
So he's my fighter to watch because this is the exact kind of fight that I want to see for a guy like him. We talk all the time about the need for tests. And so here's a 26-year-old fighter on a 5-fight winning streak, but ostensibly it's 3 because the first 2 were a long time ago. He had big gaps between each of them. And so he returned in June 2021, beat Jordan Levitt, and that started this run that he's on now of fighting actively and remaining active and moving forward and getting 2 knee bars. So the first one against Chris Gruetzemacher is, and look, anybody comes out and they start having a WWE finisher, I'm paying attention, right? And like we have to go into this fight waiting and looking to see if he can hit this thing on Dan Hooker, and it will make Harry's head explode if he hits this thing on Dan Hooker. The one against Chris Gruetzemacher was a classic stop leaving your fucking leg in there and messing around and playing about when this guy is trying to grab your heel and trying to look for stuff. It was the epitome of fuck around and find out. Now the Clay Guida one was a little bit better because it was a little more set up. It was a little more attacked. It wasn't, look, Clay Guida still left his leg in there and it was stupid that he got caught, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm on my back and you're just standing here with your leg exposed. That's all I mean. And so he's my fighter to watch because if this guy goes out and beats Dan Hooker, we all know the quality of Dan Hooker. We know the level of Dan Hooker. And even though it hasn't been good results over these last 5 fights, he's 1-4. The guys he's fought are world-class opposition. And so if you go out and you're Claudio Puelles and you beat this guy on Saturday night in your main card debut or your pay-per-view debut, then we got something. And if you don't, fine, you're still only 26. You can show me that maybe there's some upside still. Or maybe we find out that like you've just been hitting guys with knee bars that were being donkeys and leaving their knees exposed. But we're going to get answers one way or the other. And that's sort of the thing I'm always looking for, especially with young ascending talents like Claudio Puelles.
Indeed. Yeah, very well said. Harry, just maybe your quick thoughts on this fight, if you don't mind.
The knee bar's really easy to stop. And if Dan Hooker stops it, he'll push his fucking face into the ground. Puelles is hittable. We've seen that in all of his fights. And the knee bar from half, which is the one that Puelles likes to hit, right? And one that he's really, really good at. And one that I think he's going to need to look for in this Dan Hooker fight. I'd be very, very shocked if Hooker just decides to leave his leg in an entanglement. is very, very easy to stop. You can stop it with a crossface or a cross neck frame, and then he can't pull your leg inside. And even if he does, you just build height and high leg out. It's not a difficult thing to stop. And even if he does get all the way to the other side and he does manage to pull your knee into a 50-50 or outside Ashi, all you have to do is misalign your knee, and then there's no more knee bar. And then you can start just punching him in the face. Now, don't get me wrong, when there's somebody that's a specialist in a certain thing, then that's always something to be worried about, right? It's a tactical awareness thing, as Seanie put it earlier with the left-handed Pereira. But Dan Hooker knows what's going on here, right? He'll have watched the tape, and if not, his team will have watched the tape. And I'd be very shocked if we saw Claudio Puelles hit the half-guard knee bar or just a dangling leg knee bar. I suspect Dan Hooker uses his range, uses his length, and probably puts Claudio Puelles away.
Yeah. I kind of I'm leaning towards that as well. I'm interested. I think, Spencer, you like asking questions about every fight. I think my question is, what happens for Puelles if it doesn't work? And we're going to find that out on Saturday night against someone like Dan Hooker, high level opponent. And I'm excited to see that fight. Harry, I'm going to go to you for my low-key fight of the night, potential fight in the lightweight division, if you ask me. Renato Mocano against Brad Riddell. Just surefire rock'em sock'em potential in this fight, really. These two guys, when they get into the groove, are lunatics, and they'll throw caution to the wind. And I expect this fight to be absolutely wild.
Yeah, I can't fucking wait. Like, the more that I've looked into Poirier and Chandler, I see that that's more of a one-sided fight on the side of Poirier. But I look at Mocano and Riddell, and this just says to me, whoever finds their rhythm first, it's going to be a landslide, whatever happens. We've seen Mocano get on his bike, fight on the outside against Jeremy Stephens, and look absolutely undeniably brilliant when doing so. We've seen that Brad Riddell can come back from adversity and put the pressure on and up the gears and go through them. Both of these guys are momentum fighters. I feel like if Brad Riddell can get to the inside, he'll be able to utilize his speed and his tactical awareness. I think the angles he cuts are really, really nice. I think that the snap on his shots are really nice. And we obviously have to be talking about immediately impactful striking when we're talking about the judges' scorecards. Obviously, Mocano is a very good grappler on the ground, and I think Brad Riddell has very good scrambling ability, but won't want to spend too much time on the ground if he can help it. But when it comes to the feet, I think this is a really, really interesting fight, and this is a question of momentum and a question of who's going to be able to build their rhythm first.
Indeed it is. Spencer, I'm going to move on unless you have something to say about that fight. I want to talk about Dominic Reyes versus Ryan Spann. This is one that really interests me because we haven't seen Dominic in quite some time. And this for him is really a kind of an upheaval of his entire career, obviously coming so close to beating John Jones that time. Obviously a massive mental hurdle to kind of come over that. And look, he's coming back off of 2 knockout losses since that fight. And it's just been a massive fall downhill from Dominic Reyes, but he does have the chance to come in here. And, if he can produce the level of performance that we've seen in the past, I think he should get the job done against Ryan Spann. But like I said, he's been away for some time. Confidence is probably low. And it's a really interesting fight, kind of not buried on the undercard, but on the undercard here that has real implementations on the 205 division.
I can't wait to see this fight because I'm absolutely fascinated by both of these guys right now. Ryan Spann is somebody that I've been high on from his Contender Series days, even before that a little bit, LFA. Huge power in both hands, gigantic human being, good grappler, good finisher, good instincts, but also makes some dumb decisions in the cage. Like his 2 losses in the UFC are just dumb decisions. It's bad IQ. And if he ever corrects that part and kind of is able to slow himself down to the point where he just trusts in the weapons, this dude could maybe be a world champion. He's that good. Dominic Reyes, I scored that fight for Dominic Reyes against John Jones. I thought he won the world title. I thought he got to be the guy that beat John Jones. And I have no idea what that's like mentally to have to come back from that, of being like, I should be the champion. And now I'm fighting this Polish dude for a vacant belt. And oh shit, he just knocked me out. And now I'm fighting this new guy. And he's throwing wild shit at, and he might be broken. We have no idea. And that was my question today on One Question, is like, is Dominic Reyes just broken? And it would not surprise me at all if he's just never the same guy, right? Like,
it happens. It
had
happens.
the opportunity to have the ultimate of successes, the big, like, there may not be a bigger win than you're the guy that actually beat John Jones. And he didn't get it. And then he gets in a couple of firefights with guys that also carry rockets in their hands, and it doesn't go his way. And now he's facing another dude that carries rockets in his hands. And he's bounced around from camps, and he hasn't been around for a year and a half, I think, since his last fight. Like, this is just fascinating theater to me, because best versions of these guys are world championship contenders, but they could also be guys that are gone from the UFC in like 2 more bad performances. And we could get a bad performance from either one of them on Saturday, or we could just get absolute, like, the best of both of them. And it's an amazing fight. And we're talking about both of them as can't wait to see them again. Like, just, this might be the most like genuinely fascinating fight to me in terms of like unknowns.
Yeah, because I was very impressed, the way Dominic Reyes kind of handled that defeat by John Jones. Didn't get too emotional, stated his case, was very respectful, seemed to have a pretty good mindset leaving a fight like that. And I think you described it quite well, how close he was. And Harry coming in there and then getting knocked out in their 2 fights after that, it's really devastating as a fighter, and it's really hard to come back, because, we're all about questions on the preview show, and all you guys are as well. And there's nobody asking more questions of himself right now than Dominic Reyes whenever he looks into the mirror, I guess, at this stage. And this one is a huge one for him. If he were to lose this, it'd be 4 in a row he would drop, and it would be probably the biggest fall from grace that I can remember in recent times, if not ever, in mixed martial arts.
Yeah, for sure. And, when we talk to fighters and we talk about fighters, I think there are obviously standouts in skill and whatever else, but predominantly fighting is mental, right? Predominantly it's a confidence-based, it's an attrition-based, it's a mental state sport. It's who's more focused, who's mentally sharper on the night. Yes, especially in regional MMA, you're going to have fights where somebody is just supremely skilled over the other fighter. Those sorts of matchups happen. At the elite level of the UFC, when you're ranked in certain divisions, that doesn't really happen too much. It's very rare that you see a massive disparity in skill. But what you do see is you see fighters' mentalities in that cage, and you see them have conversations with themselves and their opponents and their corners, and whether that's verbal or non-verbal, we get to see that happen. And I talk about this in the one-man booth with Dustin Poirier, that in the Conor McGregor fight, the second one, Conor throws a left and Dustin slips it and lands his own left, and his eyes brighten and he's like, oh shit, I didn't get fucking wrecked by that left hand. And then he looks at Conor and he smiles and he points at him and he was like, that's right, motherfucker, I'm better too. But it wasn't until he told himself and he showed himself that he was better, that he could be like, oh, motherfucker, I'm going to fight you now. And then, obviously, the horrendous leg break happened and whatever. But I think for Dominic Reyes, this is things on a knife edge. If he goes in there and something happens and his brain says, we're not doing this, then Spencer might be absolutely right. And we may never see Dominic Reyes come anywhere near close to the same performance that he put in against John Jones. And for Ryan Spann, I actually completely agree. Like, we talk about fight IQ, and, I lament Francisco Trinaldo, and I lament Glover Teixeira.
Is it a possibility that Ryan Spann could be a potential new Team Powell member, perhaps?
He might be the captain of Team Powell as it goes, right? Like, the Johnny Walker performance was one of the craziest set of decision-making I have ever seen in elite level fighting.
How you can win a fight and lose a fight in one fight. That's what that fight was. He had that fight almost 3 times. Yeah.
3 times. He had that fight right in front of him 3 separate times, and still in the finishing sequence had outs, had ways to avoid it.
Yeah. And, this is, unfortunately, fight IQ is something that I just don't think you can teach, because there are moments, and this is something, again, I talk about Dustin Poirier, that in the second Eddie Alvarez fight, he just doesn't let go. He's got Eddie Alvarez exactly where he wants him, and he just doesn't let go. And Ryan Spann is having a chat with some fella fucking 15 blocks away while he's trying to finish a fight. And Johnny Walker's like, oh, you're not going to finish me, are you? Because you're fucking over here somewhere mentally, and I have no idea what's going on. And I think that's the mental aspect that we're talking about. All these fighters know what shots to pick. They know what shots are in front of them. They can see with their own eyes what shots are available. But in the heat of the moment, when the adrenaline is pumping and everything is before you, this win, this precipice is before you, the platform is there for you to stand on. The question is, can you do it? And I feel like the question in this fight is, who is mentally available?
Indeed, it will be interesting to see that one. That's a cracking fight as well. I mean, the card keeps on giving, and the next fight is no different as well. You know, a person that you've been very high on, Spencer, is Erin Blanchfield in her career so far, and rightly so too. A phenomenal prospect coming through in the 125-pound division. She comes up against Molly McCann, who's been on quite a journey herself in recent times and has brought us along on that journey with her. But now we're at that crossroads in the journey where we're coming to some serious tests and some serious competition. And Erin Blanch is the first one of those tests from Molly McCann. And it's a difficult one, I would have to say. Now, I'm not going to go flat out and say that she has no chance to win this. She has every chance to win this. But I feel that Molly McCann has to perform at a peak level and bring it to the next level of her kind of level of performance that we've seen so far in order to be successful in this fight. And we talk about litmus tests. This is the perfect litmus test to see if Molly is ready to take on the top 10 in the 125-pound division.
Yeah, it's a terrific matchup from every which way. Harry said earlier that no matter what, the UFC wins. And this is one of those matchups, right? If Molly McCann wins, then this story that has been great so far this year with 2 wins in London just continues to be great. And all of a sudden, this fan favorite that has a nation behind her and a running mate in Paddy Pimblett just continues to roll on. And we get, March in London again for that pay-per-view with Leon Edwards on the main event. Well, Molly's got a spot on that card against an even bigger name. And if Erin Blanchfield goes out and wins, well, then this prospect is 4-0 in the UFC and just beat the woman that was on a nice little run that had maybe the knockout of the year against the one of Carolina. And oh, by the way, she's 23 and she's already ranked and all of these different things. Molly needs to be the best she's ever been to win this fight. And I don't say that in a dismissive sense. I think she, over her last couple fights, has been the best she's ever been. And so it's very much a possibility. She can win this fight. I think JJ Aldrich showed a little bit of the way for right now, how to beat Erin Blanchfield. You just got to volume. You just got to be in her face. You just got to outbox her because she's not a great striker. She can throw some stuff and she's got a little bit of pop here and there and some sandpaper to her, but she's a grappler. And so if you can keep her on her feet and just defend well and maintain space and box her up, all there. And Molly can do that. Molly's a good boxer. The problem is that the 3 fights that Molly's lost in the UFC are all against grapplers, are all against people that put her on the ground and kept her on the ground. So 2 of them kept her on the ground, Tyler Santos and Laura Procopio. One of them put her on the ground and just was like, we don't need to stay here too long. I'm going to get this finish. And so that's the question. Has she shored that up enough? Now, the good thing for her is that Erin Blanchfield isn't a wrestler. She's a grappler. And so it's not blast doubles and it's not all kinds of big explosive takedowns. And so maybe you can avoid the clinch. Maybe you can maintain some of that distance. But it's a tall ask. It's a tough test, but it's the right test for both of them at this point. And I can't wait to see what happens.
Absolutely. I can't either. And there's 2 great points there that you made. And that is the kind of kryptonite of Molly. And her kryptonite has been so far the grappling, Harry. But I feel, obviously she has progressed. We've seen that progression too. But at the very least, what Molly has to come out and do at the start of this fight is go and grab that respect from Erin Blanchfield immediately. And you cannot let Erin Blanchfield get on the front foot or let her build her confidence in this fight. You've got to go there, like Spencer said, get in her face and make her move in the back foot and just make things awkward with shots, high and low body, open up those shots. What Molly seems to want to do lately is to kind of do that, come with those flurries, get somebody up against the cage where she can unleash those kind of the spinning back elbows and other stuff as well. And she's done that quite well. How do you expect her to match up against Erin Blanchfield here? Are you expecting another Molly meatball show, or are you expecting Erin Blanchfield to kind of go out there and get the job done with her grappling?
I mean, I think this one is a big mental battle as well, right? Molly is coming off 3 of the greatest performances of her career. Erin Blanchfield had a perfect fight last time out against JJ Aldrich. And what I mean by perfect is she goes out, she gets pieced up a little bit, but she finds a way to win. And for somebody at 23, and we talked about this afterwards, for somebody of 23 years of age to be 3-0 in the UFC and to have had 3 learning fights, I like that. I like that a lot.
Spread some salt on that. That's some good vibes right there, early days.
Damn right. So, like, if she goes back and she says to her coach, she's like, fuck me, those first 3 minutes were fucking horrendous. Like, and then I got hold of her neck and things happened and I went home with my win bonus. Fine. You can expect that she has a team around her that say, okay, well, we know that JJ Aldrich is a pretty good boxer for MMA. We need to get better at the striking things. We need to be able to move our feet. We need to be able to cut angles. We need to be able to duck under shots. We need to be able to read feints better. And then we can get to the grappling things. If I'm Molly McCann, I'm coming in here and I think I'm fucking lightning, right? Twice we've hit spinning back elbows. One was the cleanest knockout you'll see. The other one rocks Hannah Goldie and she finishes it with shots. No problem. Beautiful wins. Great performances. We know that Hannah Goldie is a very, very strong grappler, very physically strong. She came down to London Grapple and did a bit of training there, and I can confirm she's a thickums. That's what the kids say. And she was as wide as a fucking boulder. And Molly dealt with all of those situations pretty well. I think having Leah McCourt in her camp and building sort of a stable of females around her and expanding the breadth of female training partners that Molly has had has only been a good thing for her. Females fight differently. They move differently to males, and it's an entirely different prospect when sparring with them. So I think that's a great thing for Molly. And I agree with everything you've said about pace and range and volume. And I think if Molly can work the body, work the legs specifically in the first little while, then the headshots will come. Because not only will Erin want to panic wrestle a little bit more, and I don't mean panic wrestle disrespectfully, but if you're getting pieced up, you're going to have to look to close the distance somehow. And I think Molly will then be able to see the clinch exchanges and see the grappling exchanges come sooner. And she's going to be looking for that spinning elbow off clinch exchanges. She's going to be looking to cut the angle and find that elbow. And I think Erin Blanchfield, if she's going to win this fight, is going to have to do the opposite.
Can we get a bit of scouse before you go?
Fucking hell, mate.
All right, lads. All right. How's it going?
Us Scousers don't get knocked out, mate.
I love it. Hey, Spencer, come on. We've all give her a scout.
No shot.
Come on.
No.
Come on.
Fucking hell, Spencer. Come on.
Fucking about with this.
Come on, lads. Give us a bit of scouse, mate.
Come on, have a bevy.
No, hard pass.
Okay, if you're not going to give us that, at least give us a rundown of the rest of the card. We've got a bunch of other fights under here. We're going to rattle through them real quickly. Give me the rundown on some of the fights that are sticking out to you on the prelim section of this card, Spencer.
So, I mean, I actually like all of them just from a, they're fun fights. Like we talked about this last week with Polyana Viana and Jinhyu Fry going in, right? It doesn't mean anything. There's no real jeopardy in many of these fights. Like these aren't fights to figure out who's becoming a contender or anything like that. Maybe one or two of them have a little bit of that element. Montel Jackson is somebody that I can see maybe progressing in the bantamweight division. The winner of the Petrosky Wellington Turman fight maybe matriculates up the middleweight division because it's middleweight though. Like it's not like it's same with Carlos Alberg and Nick Negamarianu, right? Like it's not because they're elite talents. It's because the divisions are so shallow, but they're all fun, entertaining fights that like from minute one of Saturday, we get the goods. Somebody's getting hurt in that first fight. Carlos Ulberg and Nick Negumereanu are going to sling at each other. Carlos Ulberg.
Submission in there. That's a submission written all over it.
Carlos Ulberg is, listen, I don't mind saying it, beautiful to look at.
A lovely looking man. I have to say that too.
Just a specimen.
Got them jeans.
And I mean, he's getting a push. He's got the CKB backing. He's got the Izzy and Co. Right. He's coming off Contender Series. But Nick Negumereanu has quietly won 4 straight. And look, it's not great competition, but you can only beat the fuckers that they put in front of you. And he's doing that job. And I think he does it on Saturday. But like the rest of them, as I said, Montel Jackson is a guy that I've liked since Contender Series. If he fought more regularly, I think he's further ahead in the bantamweight division. But he's a victim of that division just being so goddamn good, right? He's fighting. So he's been in the UFC for over 4 years. Will be his 8th fight. You can't make headway in this division when you're only fighting twice a year because it's just, there's so many dudes that pass you every 6 months. But if he goes out and beats Julio Arce, who is a good fighter and is from the area and fought really tough competition on the regional scene and has been very good in the UFC overall, just in terms of we know the quality of him, that's a good win. So he can move forward. Mike Trezano and Sungwoo Choi are just going to beat the holy hell out of each other. Like, give me some of that. You remember Mike Trezano's fight with Lucas Almeida. It was a terrible fight that was wildly entertaining. This will be the same. I'm interested in seeing if Karolina Kowalkiewicz can get another win. Matt Frevola and Otman Zatar. I hope if Matt Frevola wins, he turns and looks at Otman Zatar and does the like, what's in the bag? Similar to the Brad Pitt, what's in the box? Because that's all we really need. And like, these are just like, give me fights like this. Like, I know we want there to be jeopardy and ramifications and all this stuff all the time. And it doesn't have to be. Just give me fun fights. All of these are fun fights. I'm looking forward to every single one of these. And Saturday can't get here soon enough.
Indeed. If I'm Otman Atazar, I'm like, oh, what's in the bag? What's in the bag? And
like, I'm walking to the octagon with a burlap sack over my shoulder.
Oh yeah. And then you're like, then what you do is you root around and let, oh, what's here? Pow! Like that. That's it. Get fight over. Performance of the night. And then he'd be stacking the 50 grand in that bag and walking back out of there. Boom, boom, boom. Bish, bash, bosh. That is another UFC preview show. Look, it's going to be a big night of fights. Spencer rounded up the prelims so good. There is not a bad fight on this card. There's been plenty of bad fights on fight night cards. Don't happen on pay-per-views. Everyone is there. You're going to want to tune in. Very early. Check out those fights. Something else I want you guys to check out is the top right corner. That's the Severe MMA Patreon. Sign up there. All the guys are on a Speaker's Corner. Spencer's podcast is on all early access to his work as well. What else is on it? Chasing Pack, other things. Go check it out. You know the drill at this stage. Check out all of Spencer's work. One Man Boot. Check out Spencer. I'll get the One Man Boot. Check out Spencer's stuff on severemma.com. He's got a shit ton of content, goes up each and every week on the YouTube channel. Go over there, support it, like it, retweet it when you see that. Check out his conversation with John Gooden. It's excellent. It's half excellent because I've only listened to half of it and I'm going to listen to the other one on my flight to Boston. But I know the rest of it is going to be good. Check out One Man Boot that Harry Powell does. That work that man puts into that podcast, fucking check it out. Or there will be slaps. I'm going to put it to you that way. There's going to be slaps if you don't check out One Man Boot.
We'll find you and slap you.
100%. Check out the Owl Triangle. We had Max Lally on this week. All of that stuff will be found on Patreon or Severe MMA YouTube channel. UFC 281. Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. We're just a couple of days away. There's been talking about freezing, guys. There's been talking about the movie Frozen, but all the fans want is Israel Adesanya to let it go. Let it go. Let it go. Just fucking let it go, Izzy, and give us the fight that we want. Goodbye. Good luck.